Evening. I'm going to call the Oceanside Planning Commission meeting for March 8th to order. Couple of housekeeping items first. For those of you joining us on TV, I can never remember what the channel is, the local channel that's broadcasting this.
KOCT.
KOCT, thank you. We have, as you can see, a number of commissioners in chambers tonight, and we have two commissioners that are joining us via Zoom. While we are in chambers, the commissioners will be keeping on their masks unless they are speaking, which I just did now. I put my mask down. Sorry for the mumbling. Hopefully you were able to join us via Zoom, which is how we've been participating with these meetings over the past several meetings. I believe that's it in terms of housekeeping. We have a number of items on the agenda tonight, and I think we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Morrissey, would you lead us?
Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Like our last few meetings, we will ask the public who's participating to remain muted. We have, if you've submitted a request to speak on an item, we will unmute you at that point and allow you to provide your input. Commissioners, the two commissioners online, I can see you on my screen. And so I'm going to use the raise your hand if you'd like to participate, or you have a question or want some input, and I'll recognize you at that point.
Roll call.
Commissioner Goodkind, did you have a question?
Roll call.
Roll call, yes.
He's getting to that.
I'm getting that. I'm a little slow tonight.
Still housekeeping.
Still housekeeping.
New procedures, it's been too long.
City Planner, would you do the roll call, please?
Thank you. Good evening. Chair Rosales. Vice Chair Balma.
Present.
Commissioner Busk.
Here.
Commissioner Morrissey.
Here.
Commissioner Custer.
Here.
Commissioner Crayhill via Zoom.
Here.
And Commissioner Goodkind via Zoom.
Present.
So for the record, you have all 7 members. 5 are in the chambers, with Commissioners Goodkind and Crayhill participating via Zoom.
Great, thank you. Moving on then to communications of matters not on the agenda. Do we have any items not on the agendas tonight and request to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we have 2 speakers who requested to speak on non-agenda items. The first one is Dennis Martinick.
Okay. Mr. Martinick? Give us a minute while we unmute you.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had difficulty hearing Jeff. 1 and 2, if I slur my words, I got stung by a dozen or so bees this afternoon. And you can see the face isn't working as well as it usually does. I wanted to speak regarding an issue pertaining to safety, and especially as it relates to the floodplain. When we went through the North River Road project, it came out that the boundaries had been changed. We applied, a couple of members applied for information as to how it was done and based on what criteria. How did you evaluate the floodplain in such a way that they would be allowed to build more homes in areas that have flooded in the past. The request for information, they were addressed, but not the information as to how the evaluation was done. So what I'm asking is that the Planning Commission ask for the process. How was the change made? It's done by engineering primarily. And then what criteria was used or is used to justify a boundary change? There have been a couple of articles in the newspapers related to just the opposite happening, that boundaries are being expanded to address for climate change. But that is not what happened in Oceanside on that issue. From what we can find out, there's been no qualitative or quantitative justification for a change in those boundaries. So I hope that the Planning Commission asks for some type of information from staff at either a workshop or even a brief address before a Planning Commission meeting or at the beginning of a Planning Commission meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinick. One more speaker.
Mr. Chairman, our next speaker is Phil Johnston.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. My name's Phil Johnston, Sleeping Indian Road. As some of you already know, I've also got an interest in recent changes to the floodplain boundaries in the vicinity of the proposed North River Farms housing development. I've reviewed these changes and believe they were not done properly. So the San Luis Rey River usually doesn't look dangerous, but this is misleading. The river's drainage area is 557 square miles. So when a massive storm system dumps significant rain into that area for a period of many days, the river discharge becomes very formidable. And safety design factors must accommodate this type of extreme weather event. Okay, so what happened? In 2017, changes to the floodplain boundaries were submitted by an engineering contractor. The contractor was working for a private party with a strong commercial interest in having the flood hazard become narrower than it was previously.
You just have to click the mouse.
So clearly there's a strong potential for bias, which requires careful review of the submission. And I've made numerous inquiries regarding this to the City Council through the public records request process and by corresponding with the city engineer. The raw data, which was the basis for the change, is unavailable, if it ever existed. The report submitted is neither complete or understandable. And I've been unable to gather any evidence the city made an effort to review the technical work before accepting it. So what needs to happen? So the city would prefer that this could be considered finished, perhaps not perfect, but not worth the effort to correct. And I feel that this would be expedient, but completely unacceptable. To do this would validate a work ethic of cutting corners when critical safety factors are in play. Not having a proper review of engineering changes submitted by a contractor should make any engineer think of Kansas City. So I believe it's imperative for the city to either restore the floodplain boundaries to their earlier state or arrange an independent project to properly evaluate the hydrogeology of the river in this area, or possibly flag this as a disputed area in which no development may occur until a proper evaluation is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That's it? Thank you.
There's no more speakers on the non-agenda items.
Thank you. We'll go to approval of the minutes from the previous meeting of February 22nd, 2021. I will do a roll call. I approve the minutes as they stand. Vice Chair Bama,
I also approve.
Commissioner Busk,
Approve.
Commissioner Morrissey,
Approve.
Commissioner Custer, Commissioner Crayhill,
Approve.
and Commissioner Goodkind.
Approve.
Thank you. We don't have any items on the consent calendar or to the transportation items, so we'll go to public hearings. Starting with item number 4, which is recommendations from the Brother Benno's Standing Committee regarding revisions to conditions of approval for the Brother Benno's Conditional Use Permit. This is a continuation of an item from our February 8th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Before we start, I wanted to make a couple of opening comments. The background on this, and staff will cover a lot of this, but the background on this is the initial 1990 CUP that was issued to Brother Benno's, and then there were some revisions in 1993. The reason we took this issue on in October of 2019, the Standing Committee, was because of recent number of years of complaints about the activities around Brother Benno's: trespassing, loitering, littering, vehicle camping, and a number of other things. So again, we started the Standing Committee, the Planning Commission did in October 2019. We had 4 meetings. The point of that all was to look at some modifications and some changes that could be incorporated to improve the situation of what was happening out at Brother Benno's in the area. That was the goal, to allow the Brother Benno's to retain its conditional use permit, but require reasonable modifications to accomplish that goal. So a CUP, conditional use permit, is by its nature an agreement that allows a city to consider special uses by an essential or desirable business to a particular community, but which are not allowed as a matter of right within a zoning district through a public hearing process. It's an agreement to allow, with certain conditions, that the business can operate under. It's a bargain that's made as part of the discretionary public process. So again, what we've been tackling since October 2019 is the idea to see what modifications can be added to the original CUP that brings a renewed confidence to the community and the Planning Commission that Brother Benno's deserves its conditional use permit. Now, as stated in the staff report provided to the Planning Commission, there has been a marked decrease in issues related to Brother Benno's since the Standing Committee started its review in October 2019. That's encouraging. So we're going to solicit public input as we did at our February 8th meeting, and we would prefer that if you're going to repeat the same comments that you made at that meeting, that you find another way to articulate that. Essentially, we received a lot of comments last time. I know we have a number of speakers tonight. We would prefer that you bring some new commentary to the process tonight. With that, I will request disclosures. I received a number of emails provided by staff. Of course, I was at the February 8th meeting and familiar with Brother Benno's. Vice Chair Bama?
I also have the same disclosures, along with the fact that we had a business in that same industrial park very close to Brother Benno's for over 30 years.
Thank you. Commissioner Busk?
Yes, I was at the February 8th meeting, have read numerous emails and staff reports, and over the last 2 weeks, I've also made a number of visits to the site
Thank
at
you.
different parts of the day.
Thank you. Commissioner Morrissey?
Same disclosures were at the last meeting. Read emails. I actually also made a site visit yesterday. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Custer?
I listened to the voice recording of the February 8th meeting. Drove by several times, different days, different times a day. Read the reports and the emails.
Thank you. Commissioner Goodkind?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. So I have visited the site. I have read the staff reports. I have reviewed the public communication. I was in the February meeting. And just for the benefit of the public, want to note the same thing I noted last month, which is that I was not a member of the standing committee, so have just recently had access to the committee's findings and reports. I want to note, interestingly, that 2 of the 3 standing committee members, and I appreciate their service on this task, voted against this resolution last month, which is a bit concerning to me. So I'm open-minded, and I'm going to listen to the testimony again, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Crejo?
Yeah, I was on the standing committee. I was at the February 8th meeting, gotten the same public input as the rest of us, but I also spoke to the applicant's representative briefly.
Thank you. And I believe we have a presentation by Scott Nightingale, or at least some testimony.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Scott Nightingale, Senior Planner, here to present agenda item number 4 for the continuation of the February 8th Planning Commission meeting item for the conditional use permit review for the Brother Bennos. Just got a short presentation. Thank you, Chairman Rosales, for providing some of that background. As Chairman Rosales stated, the site here is a general type daycare use where they provide services to low-income families and also homeless individuals. Depicted here in the square at 3260 Production Avenue. A little synopsis here. We're here to adopt Planning Commission Resolution 2021 P05 for revisions recommended from the Brother Bennos Standing Committee regarding the conditions of approval from the original Brother Bennos Conditional Use Permit C3390, which includes revisions to the existing conditions of approval 33, 34, 36, and adding 3 new conditions, 37, 38, 39, to regulate the operations of the facility with finding conditions approval attached therein. So just a little background on February 28th. We did take this forward to the Planning Commission. There was a motion made. It did not pass. It was voted 3-3 with Goodkind, Balma, and Crahill as no votes. The commission then continued the item to the March 8th hearing when Commissioner Custer was actually absent. And as she presented, she has listened to the testimony. So we are here for this continued meeting, and that was approved as a vote of 4-2 with Goodkind and Crahill as no votes. And as specified in the synopsis, the numbers actually for the conditions of approval 33, 34, 36, 38, and 39 in the resolution have been reverted back to how they were originally presented. And in the staff report, we did make some corrections. There was unfortunately, there were some formatting issues. So now the conditions will reflect the sequence that was presented at the original standing committee meeting we had last November 12th, 2020. There is a new condition, revision, condition 37, which was specified in the previous Planning Commission meeting by the Brother Bennos attorney, and it will read as follows, and that is in the resolution that is forward here tonight, and it'll read as stated here. On-site mail service will be discontinued when, in the opinion of Brother Bennos, it appears a customer is not progressing towards resolution of his or her unhoused condition within a reasonable period of time. On-site mail service pickup times for users shall be from 6:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. We have also ran this by the Brother Bennos attorney, and they are okay with this. So with that, staff recommends that these revisions and modifications to the existing conditional use permit which are consistent with the requirements of the general plan and zoning, be approved, and adopt Planning Commission Resolution 2021 P05 for the revisions as stated in the synopsis. This concludes our presentation. I'm happy to answer your questions. I will be sitting on the sidebar here.
Scott, before you go, the other conditions, so you had 37 up there. Are the other ones, do you have a slide that would depict those? Or if we wanted to discuss them individually, how can we pull those up?
Yes, I have them further down in the PowerPoint if we need to reference them.
Great,
So,
thank you.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Scott before we go to the public? Okay, thank you, Scott.
Yes.
Oh, there, I can see you. Go ahead. Did you want to comment?
I did what you asked and raised my hand, but I guess.
Yeah, I couldn't see you until he got rid of the screen. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify for the benefit of the discussion, since there's been some confusion with the numbering and also some changes were made immediately prior to the February meeting. So just for clarification, that right before this resolution, as it did last month, omits the references to the police department that were in the previous paragraph 35, current paragraph 34, and previous paragraph 40, current paragraph 39. So those references that were concerning to some individuals about involvement of the police department are still omitted, and that we have the new revised language in today's proposed resolution for the mail service. So can you just, Scott, confirm that I've got that right, please?
Yeah. Yes, Commissioner Goodkind, those were omitted. Originally, those were not proposed during the February 8th meeting. So we're still staying with the original conditions, which remove any language with OPD involvement.
Okay.
Like I said, the only change was condition 37.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify because we did get a public comment via email late today, still expressing concerns about the police clauses. And so I just wanted to clarify that those are still removed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. So I guess for reference for the commissioners, if you would look at your packet and look at the resolution, I've circled mine, but if 34, 30, 33, 34, 36, 7, 8, and 9, those should be, as Scott indicated, what we're being asked to include tonight as revisions to the CUP.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just follow up on Robin's question, the changes that remove the reference to OPD were reviewed by the police chief, and they support that.
Appreciate that. Okay, no other questions for Scott at this time. Then we will go to the public. This is a public hearing, and I'll ask the city planner to start walking through the slips that were submitted.
Mr. Chairman, our first speaker is Diane Nygaard.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Certainly, Brother Benno's provides a critical service for our community. Yet we've heard some people say that they really don't belong here in this neighborhood. I guess my question is, if not here, where? Certainly not in our residential neighborhoods, not along the coast in our tourist-serving neighborhoods, not in our commercial districts. It certainly seems like this really is the best place for Brother Benno's. They've clearly demonstrated their commitment to work towards addressing the issues that were previously of concern. I'm pleased to see the change to the one condition 37, where it's really removing onerous conditions about service delivery. It's completely inappropriate for the city to be deciding how a social service provider provides those services. That really is up to the organization to determine that. And I think several of the other conditions really are not related to the land use, they're related to service delivery. And I would submit that, please, let's be realistic about what the role of the city is in improving such conditions and support this critical service for our community. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we neglected to ask the applicant if they wanted to make any comments.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll do that now. Sorry for the bump here. I think Daryl or somebody else from the Brother Benos is, I see on the line, or we have Marco Gonzalez.
We have Marco Gonzalez and Daryl Harris. It looks like Marco's been pulled up on Zoom.
Apologies, Marco, go ahead. I should have gone to you first.
Problem. Thank you, Chair Rosales, for the opportunity to speak again with you and the other planning commissioners about Brother Benos' longstanding efforts to address the needs of Oceanside's unsheltered and working poor families. I also have on the line here Kathleen Dillman, the president of the board of the Brother Benos Foundation, and Daryl Harris, the director of operations at the Brother Benos Center, if anyone has any questions. I also wanted to thank City Attorney's Office and staff and OPD for last month's hearing for the support that was expressed for the CUP amendments, including the language that we had discussed before that hearing and kind of worked on together. I think at that last hearing, we made a lot of headway, and I thought we were actually very close to reaching an approval of a resolution. The outstanding issue on the regulation of mail service, I think we heard support for our proposed amendment to that condition from both staff and OPD. And with that support, I think we're in the position to also hear from the public. We don't have much more to add on that front, but we would like to reserve some time to respond to any new public comments or questions that come up, any new issues that folks raise. So with that, we'll go ahead and hear what the public has to say and hopefully not have too much to respond to after that. Thank you.
Absolutely, you're welcome. Okay, then we'll go back to the public. Speaker number 2.
The next speaker is Max Desposte.
Hi there, Planning Commissioner. Thank you for having me. A little clarification for our board chair. I don't mean to take too much time, but I was a little bit confused with the statement in regards to you can only speak if you have something new to add. Even though staff members send the same thing via email, it kind of, I know it's well-meaning because we're trying to streamline the people that are speaking, but it's quite confusing from the public. So how do I know if I'm speaking on the same, if I don't know which one is going to be approved? Because as we remember when we spoke last time, we were signing up to an old proposal. So anyway, so I invite the chair and the staff to be more open about public comments, because that could be a reason. I have at least 7 people that didn't sign up because they felt like they didn't know how to chime in, even though they have an opinion. So briefly, I'm in agreement with the latest changes that were brought at the end of the previous commission for a lot of reasons that I already stated. I'm not going to go there. I have a little concern that perhaps Brother Bano can answer, because there was that conditions about the ID once again. I know the police review was taken in consideration, so there will be not exchange of data. But I wonder what the city business is to impose a cap with an ID, which is an internal organizational process for any nonprofit. So I'm just wondering the legality of it. I'm not going into if it's worth it or not. It just doesn't make any sense. But again, maybe Brother Bano can explain that, but mostly not just Brother Bano, because obviously, if they're accepting to do that, that's okay. But I wonder if a cap should actually open a Pandora box and put inside something that's never put before, the control of the systematic way nonprofit operates in the area. Thank you for your time, and I'm done.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Anna Marie Hallman.
Hello. I am not going to show my video at the moment. I attended the February 8th planning meeting, and I was inspired by the community's outpouring of support for Brother Benno's. I would just like to echo that support again, although I didn't speak last time. And I just want to say on the record that I fully oppose any more police involvement with any of the people seeking services at Brother Benno's. And I am a little concerned about the revisions on condition 37 because, at least from my understanding of what I read, the conditions are that the people seeking the mail services have to prove that they're somehow getting housing at some point. And I guess my concern is that how is that even going to happen? How are people going to prove that that's happening, right? I think that condition might just further demoralize folks that are already at the margins of society, and it doesn't really offer a real and sustainable solution. I'd also like to go on the record to say that the well-being of Oceanside requires that each part of the city flourishes, and Oceanside's not going to flourish and will continue to experience houseless issues because it doesn't provide accessible, affordable housing. I think the city is selling its soul to developers, land grabbers, and wealthy people who buy up properties and turn them into vacation rentals. That's making property values skyrocket, and it's displacing locals, to be honest, especially right now during this pandemic. And I think also a lot of the people that are complaining about Brother Benno's and houseless people are focusing on the litter and the nuisance, but I don't hear anybody talking about the bigger issue, honestly, of capitalism and development and how that affects the environment. And I think that's a much bigger issue. So I just want the city to invest in the people, houseless folks included. And then I think that's the way you're going to see the city really flourish. And that's it for me.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Isaiah Briggs.
What's going on, everybody? I'm still kind of shocked. I know amendments were made, but what we saw last time, I think, was a very obvious attempt to control, surveil, and penalize the most vulnerable in our community. And I mean, policies like this, I find it just baffling that we will do everything except just give people what they need. We need affordable housing. We need to expand, voucher programs. We need to make sure people are connected to resources. But instead, we're making it harder for them to get their mail and need an ID to get food. I just find it's a reverse approach that is only going to perpetuate the problem. So yeah, let's see. If the problem is, we have some businesses in that area that say, oh, we don't want loitering, trespassing people. I feel like the solutions of making it harder to get food or get your mail, I just have no idea how that's going to connect to any positive solution for this area. And to be quite honest, I think it's clear that, the city has created this problem. I mean, the incompetence and neglect when it has come to homelessness has been chronic. I mean, we're the largest city in North County and we have no shelter. I think that's ridiculous. And now that when we see, okay, now we have, a lot of people living on the streets, we're resorting to draconian and Orwellian policies that, I'm still very skeptical about. I know the revisions were made, but the fact that they were in there is very concerning. And yeah, let's see. Yeah, I would also just like to support, any movement away from any state involvement in nonprofits as well. And yeah, we got to put people over property. I think that policies like this are obviously catering to business interests in the area at the expense of human lives. And I find that to be, very concerning, at the least. It's disgusting. It's repulsive. And until we can actually invest in our community, I don't think that there's going to be any solution that we're going to see, and things are just going to keep getting worse and worse. So I would really, like everyone to start thinking critically here about meaningful ways forward that are going to involve affordable housing, involve resources that are actually helping people instead of just making getting bare necessities more and more difficult. So I think the logic just doesn't make any sense moving forward with these kind of policies. But yeah, and I think our community understands that. So I think that's all I've got to say for the moment.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kai Simovich.
Hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Kai.
Hi, yeah. Honestly, just kind of want to echo what's already been said about this whole situation. I'm glad to hear about the revisions that have been made. I think they were, the original wording was needless and dehumanizing, and I think what we're doing is at least a better step in the right direction. But I mean, shoot, like Isaiah said, this is just catering to the business interests. These are just hoops that you're making people who want to feed their fellow humans jump through in order to provide basic needs for people that, I mean, there should be human rights. And it's deeply disturbing on a very fundamental level. I'm at a loss for words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's all the speakers that have asked to speak at this item.
Okay, thank you. We'll close then the public hearing. And I'll return to Marco Gonzalez if you wanted to, I don't know if I didn't hear any questions or directed to you specifically, but if it's your opportunity to kind of speak to anything or add any context to the comments.
Yeah, I did want to take a chance. Thank you, Chair Rosales. You know, after the public hearing and after we made our presentation and comments at the February hearing, at the end, Commissioner Balma had some very strong opinions and statements. And following that hearing, she also made some very strong comments on social media and in a letter to city council members. And what was interesting to me was one of the things that Commissioner Balma pointed out. I mean, obviously she has a long history in this community, and she's seen how the businesses down there have suffered in the past. But her concern was that they weren't there at the hearing to make their point, to be heard. And I know many of you on the commission were there at the first hearing of the subcommittee and multiple subcommittee hearings when members of the business community did show up and voice their positions. And I think instead of finding fault with the fact that the business community isn't here to go after Brother Benno's, perhaps we should recognize that this is because Brother Benno's has reached out. Brother Benno's has tried really hard to be a good neighbor, has instituted new policies at the request of its neighbors to minimize the negative interactions that we saw historically. And while I understand Commissioner Balma's perspective that this has been here too long and it needs to go and it needs to be someone else's problem, I think rather than look at it from that perspective, we should instead be saying, hey, we're in a modern era of homelessness need, of unsheltered, of increase in unsheltered people in Oceanside. And maybe what we've gone through and maybe what we've learned here, we should be seeking to export to other areas of the city so that as we look to build a shelter or provide additional services, we can perhaps start where we're at now instead of having to kind of get here over a number of years. So just respectfully to the commissioners, I think the lack of opposition here today, while we know it exists in the community generally, I think the fact that Brother Benno's has had supporters here consistently and that today you've heard only from supporters means we're doing something right. And I just want to leave you with, our commitment to continue to work with the community to implement the various conditions and provisions in the proposed CUP amendment and to continue to serve this needy population as we have. I thank you for your time, and please call on us if you have any questions as you deliberate. Thank you.
We will do that. Thank you. Okay, we've had staff's presentation, some input from Mr. Gonzalez and then the public. Any questions for any of the, for staff or Mr. Gonzalez or any deliberation at this point? Vice Chair Baumann, go ahead.
He probably knew I was going to come back on Marco a little bit. So Marco, I appreciate everything you do for Brother Benno's. I appreciate Brother Benno's. I've said that before several times in our last meeting, that I think that it's a very valuable service. There's a lot of people that are getting a lot of help from Brother Benno's, and I wouldn't want to see it go away. I want to see it just basically improve, and possibly it has improved, but we just received another letter from our last meeting to this meeting of a larger landowner. I think he stated he has 80,000 square feet in the park, that he is expressing all of those same concerns we've heard over and over again that I also experienced when we had a business there. So I just think that you got to understand that businesses are, in a way, I don't want to say they're afraid, but they kind of in a way are, because they have tried to speak out. They have tried to approach the clients of Brother Benno's so many different times. I've heard this. And then they have gotten things happen to them, that they don't want to even go there. They would rather just be quiet, step back, and try to be as friendly as they can so that they won't hurt their businesses or break into their cars or do everything else that happens to them. So it's not that it's just because we haven't heard from them, it's gone away. It's still there. We just got to work harder together. I mean, I think Brother Benno's has done a great job trying to help out with picking up the trash and doing what they can to tell their clients to be respectful of the businesses. I think it's getting better, possibly. But I know myself personally, I would like to ask my fellow commissioners if we might want to consider on condition number 36 to maybe change the review time from a year to 6 months. And the reason I want to ask that is just because it's a hot button, right? We've had so many businesses and so many people that are on this. And I would also like to add with that same condition to change from a year to 6 months, that the staff would prepare in their staff report basically information from the OPD and the HOT team as to if there are already incidences that have occurred in that 6 months, or in the airport industrial area, along with the San Luis riverbed and the surrounding residential, just to see if there's anything that has changed, to be documented, to be like official, not just like a letter from a business owners that says that all the stuff is happening. I'd rather see it from the police that is it still happening, but the offices, the businesses have to report this stuff. So that's why I asked you guys this because, like I said, it's a hot button. I think it would also show that possibly Brother Benno's has improved, and all these things we're actually adding as conditions would make it even more logical that this is actually working. But it also, we'd like to see if the relationships between the businesses and Brother Benno's would improve. But I also think it would show that we're supporting the landowners and the businesses by just addressing this and seeing we want to look at it again in 6 months rather than a year. So I'm just asking if you guys think it's valuable that we can just change that one caveat from a year to 6 months and address this again, have some OPD and some hot issues kind of like to see, give us some information, give us some evidence if this is really improving or not, because I don't think we should just let it go for another year. I think this is a very passionate thing for a lot of people that have a lot of workers there and people that it's a hard thing. Anyway, sorry.
No, thank you. Just a comment before I go to Commissioner Custer. I think at the last meeting, I supported the idea, or I made a comment anyway, about providing some metrics, whether we do this every 6 months or every 12 months, some kind of metrics that we can then evaluate. We've heard anecdotally that things have improved since we stood up the standing committee, and that's great, and I think I acknowledge it. That's great. Going forward, whether we do 6 months or a 12-month review, I would hope we'd have some data that we could, sort of touch and feel and understand more than anecdotally that things have improved. So I would support that concept. And again, I'm not too stuck on the 6 or 12-month period, but definitely that we see something that gives us a clear vision of, it's improving. And I'll leave it to staff to kind of come up with how we bring those metrics together, but I think that is going to need to be part of the look forward. Commissioner Custer?
I think we should absolutely modify the resolution to state 6 months. I think a year is way too long. They could start to improve. Maybe they've been improving over the last several months with all this going on, but the situation could quickly go backwards. And so to let it just grow for a year would just make it more difficult to maintain the control. And my question is, how long can the tents stay on the sidewalks? I've noticed more of those when I drove by today than I have previously. Is there a time limit from the city or the state?
Okay, we can pose that question to staff after we maybe take in some more input. Commissioner Goodkind, I saw your hand. Go ahead.
This is an opportunity for questions to staff and the applicant, right?
Correct.
Okay, but you want to hold Commissioner Custer's question okay.
Go ahead with your question. We'll come back to Commissioner Custer's.
Okay, all right. I have questions for both Mr. Gonzalez and for staff. So for Marco, on the mail service, because we had a public comment this evening asking about it, could you please articulate for us what criteria Brother Benno's would use to determine if they are progressing towards resolution of his or her unhoused condition within a reasonable period of time? That is the criteria for you to determine if they can continue to get on-site mail service. That's my question for the applicant, and then I will follow that up with a question for staff. Thank you.
Commissioner Goodkind, thank you for the question. So the reason why we had difficulty with the way the condition was originally written is because when you're talking about the clients, the customers, the people who take advantage of the services at Brother Benno's, there is no one size fits all. There is no single standard that you can apply, for instance, to a family with young children who has certain needs for housing versus a person with mental health challenges who needs more institutional support. And so, unfortunately, we can't simply write out on a whiteboard, here's what you have to do in what amount of time to show a good faith effort to address your condition. But what I can say is, through the combination of having our database and our ability to keep better data on our clients and access that more quickly through a digital database, we'll be able to put those folks in touch with services who are languishing. So for instance, if we find that someone is transient, they get mail a couple times during the year and then they disappear for months at a time, we'll know that better with the digital system than we would in our current paper system. And we'll be able to approach them and recommend services for them. So what we're going to be looking for are those folks who are long-term, habitually, chronically unhoused, who have had repeated opportunities to change their condition, but have not been able to do so. And unfortunately, I can't spell out what those situations would look like for everybody today, but I think it's in their interests, in our interests, and in the community's interests that we be able to identify when folks are struggling more and put them in touch with more aggressive services to hopefully help them with their unsheltered conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Nightingale, question for staff on resolution paragraph 39, item 39, the ID card database. Could you please explain why this is in the resolution? Because I understand that Brother Benno's is planning to implement such a system. I do not understand why it is a condition for the city. It seems to me like that is should be completely independent from the city's oversight.
Commissioner Goodkind, yeah, condition 39 does bring up the ID card. This was a condition that was not only drafted from OPD with planning and the interdepartment team's involvement, but also in collaboration with Brother Benno's. I believe in the previous meeting, Daryl Harris stated that they are working towards, and they actually have an ID card system, and a lot of these types of services provide this service. This was not classified or clarified into the resolution, so actually we're just adding it in here
to actually clarify what is being actually conducted now. There was some reworking of the conditions during the standing committee meetings that did have some more police involvement, and as stated earlier, we have removed that. So those are the reasons. Fred Armijo, I think he's on the line. He may want to chime in and add to this if you have further questions. Thank you.
I appreciate your explanation. I still don't understand why it's in there, to be honest. The ID card database. I'm just concerned that it sets a precedent for kind of a big brother style oversight of nonprofits, and is an overreach on the part of the city government to have that in there. Are we going to be monitoring and enforcing that condition? If it's a condition of their permit, we would be monitoring it, right?
Looks like Chief Armijo wants to chime in here. Let me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
unmute
I'm
him.
sorry, Chief. Okay.
Yeah. Chief, you're unmuted. You can speak.
All right. Thank you, Commission members. Fred Armijo with the Police Department. Not to throw any more wrenches in your process, but I believe the issue and several of the issues were just a position that the previous police administration had taken I don't personally feel or professionally feel that were necessary with respect to the issues that are currently being addressed with Brother Benno's. The ID card database may potentially be a leftover from what the previous chief was looking for. I don't believe, and I certainly don't want to give the commission the impression that the police department is any way requiring that. And so I would leave that completely up to your discretion and that of Brother Benno's, but we certainly don't want to leave you with the impression otherwise.
Thank you, Chief. I would like to propose moving forward that we take out that condition, condition 39.
That's a motion. I'll second that.
Can I ask you to hold that as a thought at the moment, and if you want to make a motion to that in a minute, we can do that. I want to come back to Commissioner Custer's question about tents on the sidewalk. It was posed to staff. I'm not sure if staff has any input on what's allowable on the sidewalks or not, and that's why I paused instead of taking the question initially. So hopefully you've had some time to think about that.
Chairman and Commissioner Custer, the issue of camping on a sidewalk or tenting on a sidewalk is really outside the topic of this. It's not germane to Brother Benno's. It is a larger homeless issue. I believe there's court rulings regarding when a city can and cannot prevent or prohibit camping on a street in a tent. So it's a complex legal issue. And we could certainly come back with a report, but it's not part of Brother Benno's CUP.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Busk?
Yeah, not necessarily questions, but more in the line of comments. First, in response to Commissioner Goodkind's provision number 39, while that particular issue has never been addressed before, depending on what metrics are brought up or defined for our standing committee going forward, I would guess that having that condition 39 would provide the background for many of those metrics. So I personally would like to leave that one in. Just in general, I would just like to tell the public and Brother Benno's to remember what Chair Rosales started this discussion with, which is these are business agreements between users of our city and the city. It's not a place for the city to say, we like your business, we don't like your business, we're going to shut you down, we're not. It's a straight business agreement. And Brother Benno's 30 years ago made a business agreement, which they evidently can't keep any longer. And that's to be expected. They started out small 30 years ago, and now they're quite large. They have many more programs than they had back then, and they're all necessary, absolutely, absolutely. However, unfortunately, as they grew their business, they didn't grow their business processes to adhere to their business agreement, and they fell outside the business agreement. We've heard from the public tonight that the public expects that the requirement for these services is going to grow. I think everyone in this room expects the requirements for these services are going to grow. It's not up to us as commissioners to tell Brother Benno's how to grow their business. It's up to us to say, are you living up to your agreement or not? If not, can we change the agreement in such a way that you can live up to it in today's environment and hopefully in the future? The fact that there's going to be a standing committee as a part of this resolution kind of goes towards the fact that we believe that maybe they won't be able to live up to the commitments of the new resolution, because we're going to have to keep an eye on them over the next few years, maybe every 6 months. So I would tell Brother Benno's this evening, hopefully this will pass, but I would leave it with Brother Benno's that they need to look at their business and say, what can we do differently to fit into this community where everybody acknowledges they're needed? And if that's split their business into two pieces and put part of it in this building and part of it in another building, or if it's to work with the city to find a place where the larger business can thrive, we're not here to say how to do their business. We're here to say, you're not living up to your contract right now. We'll see if we can modify the contract to one that you can live up to. And if you can't do that, you need to figure out a way to do your business in the future so that you can have a new contract with the city to provide your services. We're here not only for Brother Benno's, but as Commissioner Balma says, we're here for Brother Benno's neighbors. And that's what this contract is all about. So can we figure out, can Brother Benno's and the city figure out a way that they can inhabit this particular spot in the city in peace with their neighbors? 30 years ago, undoubtedly they were. 2 years ago, absolutely they were not. Hopefully in the near future, they'll be able to. But as they grow, I'm absolutely certain they're going to get to another point where we'll be back here saying, Brother Benno's, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. We have to do something different. And pulling the CUP is not the right solution, but modifying it to the point where they're not compatible with their current neighbors is also not a solution. So that's my lecture for this evening. Sorry about that. I do support the current resolution. I support the half an hour or 6 months, but I would like to see 39 to stay in.
Thank you for your input, Commissioner Busk. Any other comments, questions for staff?
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting to look at the screen. Commissioner Crayhill, you have your hand
it's
raised.
understandable. You're handling two different systems at once. I appreciate it. I did already voice support for removing Condition 39, the ID cards. I do think that it's superfluous, but I did want to at least comment on something that Commissioner Busk mentioned there. And I hope that it wasn't meant this way, because my understanding is that no data or metrics from the ID card system would be shared by Brother Benno's, or at least not as part of a requirement of the CUP. We fully litigated that issue of data sharing between the city and Brother Benno's, and it's not an acceptable condition. I'd be stridently opposed to any requirement that Brother Benno's share that data from their ID card system with the city. So I just want to make sure that's not what the condition reads right now. So I'm glad that that's the case. So make sure we're not changing that. And I appreciate where Commissioner Busk and Chair Rosales are coming from around describing the nature of a conditional use permit and that, the business agreement with the city. But I think it's important that we also recognize the other side of that when we review CUPs, staff goes to great lengths to describe in the staff reports what kinds of conditions can be put onto a project and the kinds of things that we need to be able to show as a city to justify those conditions. There are conditions which the city may legally require in a CUP, but there are other conditions which the city cannot legally require. It's not that the city has carte blanche to just do whatever it wants because of a CUP. Obviously, the city could choose to not provide the CUP if it made certain findings, but it can't just make whatever conditions. And the idea that the city can impose any kind of onerous condition it wants on an applicant is, from my understanding, not legal. So I just want to make sure we're also clear on the overall aspect of what a CUP really can do and can't do. And just, I guess, since we're gotten to this point in the meeting, I'll just at least kind of get to my overall perspective here. As you all have heard me say, I don't think the solution to the problems that led to the convening of the standing committee a couple of years ago now is to increase the burden on Brother Benno's. But that being said, I do think we have come to a better place now than we had been when we first began this process, and that's great. That's both in terms of the situation around Brother Benno's. We've heard from staff, that it's gotten better there, which staff was the ones who initiated this process, but also with the changes to the proposed conditions of the CUP. When this first started, they were pretty onerous and pretty extreme. I do think that, Interim Chief Armio's comments about the kind of changed position of the administration of the police department helps explain some of the softening there. And I'm much more comfortable now moving forward with the revisions to the CUP. I would still advocate we remove condition 39, but I think that at this point we've gotten to a place that makes a lot of sense. We've made a lot of progress. And I think the real thing now is that the city needs to step up. I said this at the last meeting. This isn't about Brother Benno's anymore. This is about the city, living up to its moral obligation that we all share as part of that city to our neighbors who need shelter. While there are some folks who may refuse assistance, is a tiny minority. The rest are a much larger group of our unhoused neighbors who are truly out there suffering under really difficult conditions right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic still. Our neighbors are living in cars. They're living in these tents that we're talking about. We're talking about how can we get people out of their tents. These are people in a pandemic that are just trying to survive. And most of these folks are from here. These aren't. Sometimes it's talked about like these are people from some other community moving in and invading our community. These are our neighbors that we grew up with, and I implore us to think about them as treat them like they were any other neighbors, and try to help them with getting a roof over their head. It was talked about we need temporary shelter. We do in Oceanside desperately. The city seems like it's moving that track. We need more permanent supportive housing too. There's some folks who can't care for themselves. So anyway, I'll stop with that and just say I am supportive of the revised conditions as they now stand, and I look really forward to moving on to the real work that needs to be done. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Cahill. I don't want to speak for Commissioner Busk, but I think we've ruled out at this point, per our discussion, any inclusion of the database to the city, any sharing of that information. That's not even a talking point anymore. So
Absolutely.
So that's out, and so that's how I think that issue is dead at this point. In terms of the database itself, I see this as almost a checkoff. If the applicant is going through that process and we feel like we support that process of having a database, and again, it's not going to be shared, in my mind, it's almost a checkoff that yes, they have something that supports their activities only. That metric and information won't be shared with the city. So in terms of a condition for the CUP, that's as far as it goes, and I'm comfortable with that. So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground. I think we haven't left anything untouched at this point. I know Commissioner Goodkind, you had a thought about condition 39. So I'll start with you if you would like to make a motion around that and anything else. Go ahead.
Well, before I make a motion, I'd like to, kind of take the pulse because I don't know if there's enough support for removing condition 39. I mean, my opinion about it is that Commissioner Busk, in defending keeping condition 39, stated a couple of times that it's not our job to tell Brother Bennos how to do their business. It's not our job to tell Brother Bennos how to grow. I completely agree. We have no right, we the city have no right to access the data that's in that database. And I'm extremely concerned about the precedent that it sets of requiring nonprofits to run their business a certain way, and when it has really no relationship to our conditions. So I think it's pointless to have that in there since the city has no oversight of it or no business with it, actually. So if I were going to make a motion, it would be to accept all of the conditions except for 39. So if there's support for that, I'd be happy to make that motion. But I'm not sure. So
if I can interject and maybe help out, we still have the applicant. We have Mr. Gonzalez with us. I thought I heard him early on, and if you want to unmute him, Scott, early on, make the comment that they were in support of the conditions as they are written tonight. So, Mr. Gonzalez, you heard the dialogue, the commentary here. There's a thought given to removing 39, and then there's some other thoughts thinking that it's okay to have that in there, given that we're not going to be sharing, you're not going to be sharing that information with the city. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's important for folks on the commission to understand that being under the last couple of years of contentiousness has been hard on Brother Bennos. And frankly, the conditions that we're looking at now, these are negotiated conditions, and we're just trying to get through this process so that we can focus this energy on serving the community and doing so, with our full attention. And this has weighed on us heavily. We are instituting an ID card at Brother Bennos, and we're doing it as much because we know it will make our services better and more reliable, and we'll better be able to track for our own purposes the care that our clients need and that they're receiving, so that we can be more effective in helping people stay off the street and get off the street. Whether this is a condition or not, we're going to do that. We do understand and agree with our supporters who believe that whether we do this by digital ID card, which may be the industry standard, or whether we continue the laminated paper ID cards that we've used up until now, that really should be a business decision of our organization. But frankly, at this point, it's more important that we get a resolution approved and that we move on and we can focus on funding that ID card program and looking at the needs of the community as we get through the pandemic and get people back into the center for food service. We're not asking you to remove the condition, but we do agree with the comments of some that, it's not really needed in here.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion then, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to move that we adopt Planning Commission Resolution 2021 P05 to adopt revisions recommended from the Brother Bennos Standing Committee regarding conditions of approval for the Brother Bennos Conditional Use Permit, including revisions to existing conditions of approval 33, 34, 36, and the addition of new conditions of approval 37, 38, and I am omitting 39, to regulate the operations of the facility with findings and conditions of approval attached therein. So my motion would remove condition 39 from the resolution.
Thank you for that motion. Anybody would like to make a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve the conditional use permit minus condition 39, and we have a second by Commissioner Crahill. Any further discussion? Commissioner Morrissey.
Yeah, I just like to say that this is a collaborative effort. Everybody seems to have already agreed on this, so now for us to unwind it, I think that's not wise. And so for that reason, I cannot support this. And I would rather, if this doesn't pass, that we go, I would hope that Commissioner Kurt could make a motion. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Vice Chair Obama, you have your hand raised.
I also will not support this motion based on the same comments from Commissioner Morrissey.
Those were my comments. Those were my comments as well.
Okay, so we have any further discussion? We have a motion by Commissioner Goodkind and a second by Commissioner Crayhill. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'll go around and we'll take a vote. I'll start with the maker of the motion, Commissioner Goodkind.
Aye.
Commissioner Crayhill.
Aye.
Commissioner Busk.
No.
Commissioner Morrissey.
No.
Vice Chair Obama.
No.
Commissioner Custer.
No.
And Chair, I vote no.
Mr. Chairman, we'll record that as 2 votes in favor, Commissioner Goodkind and Crayhill, and the remainder 5 votes against. The motion does not pass.
Thank you. So,
Mr. Chair?
yes, I'm sorry. Go
Well,
ahead.
there was somebody else that you had in front of me, of course.
Commissioner Crayhill, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion then that basically just keeps the staff recommendation to adopt Planning Commission Resolution number 2021 P05 to adopt resolutions recommended for the Brother Benno Standing Committee regarding conditions of approval for the Brother Benno's Conditional Use Permit C33-90, including revisions to existing conditions of approval 33, 34, 36, and the addition of new conditions of approval 37, 38, 39 to regulate the operations of the facility with findings and conditions of approval attached therein.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Crayhill. Can I get a second?
I would make a second only if the maker of the motion would consider the idea of amending resolution number 36 to change from annual to biannual, so it would be every 6 months, or at least the first time we would do it in 6 months, and review this to see how we're doing, because I think it's important to show that the city really does care about the businesses there and the residential community that surrounds this neighborhood, and see how Brother Benno's has progressed with these conditions. I think it's important that we do this. I think that Brother Benno's has improved since we've been putting so much focus on it, and if by just letting it go for another year, it could go the other way. So I really feel strongly about that we just amend that to 6 months rather than annual.
Maker of the motion, Commissioner Crayhill.
I appreciate where Commissioner Obama is coming from. I would like to point out 2 things. One, that specific condition number 36, includes the phrase, "The committee shall be convened at times as may be deemed appropriate or necessary by the planning commissioner or the city planner to review the conditions of approval." The annual basis is not necessarily precluding us from being able to meet more often. And furthermore, the comment was made against the last motion that we should not be changing the negotiated conditions that were presented to us. So I don't see why we'd be saying we shouldn't change them from one motion and the next motion would be changing them. I think we still have the ability to convene more often, so I don't think that's necessary.
Vice Chair Obama. Okay, is that item 30, what is it? 36.
6, right? And I'm trying to see, it says.
36 reads that we have a standing commission, there will be an annual report.
Right.
It's the second sentence.
It just says basically on an annual basis. It doesn't say anything about whenever we decide we want to change. I just think it's important to tell, like this, like with the letter we got, and I'm sure you got the same letter, Kyle, from Ocean Park, how they strongly, I mean, they're a pretty big landowner there in the park, and Giuseppos also are another large landowner I've spoken to, along with Nito Denko. These guys are big people, big players in that park, and to me, to support them and show that we really do care and we really want to step up to the plate and look at this again, because obviously Brother Benno's is doing, from what we are understanding, they're doing a better job, but then when you look around the park, it doesn't look like they're doing a better job, but that's not Brother Benno's fault. That's just the fault of we getting more homeless, and that's what's going on right now. But I think it's important that we keep our focus on this and that we actually ask our OPD and HOT to bring us back to develop this matrix, to bring us back just some evidence and see if everything is working out okay. And then if it is looking good in 6 months, then we can go to a year again. I mean,
And I could support that, Commissioner Baumann.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Baumann, in the interest,
it's a good thing.
Vice Chair Baumann, in the interest of moving forward, I definitely, I'm open to that. I think the requirement's mostly on the city at that point anyway. So as the maker of the motion, I'll accept that.
Thank you. Then I would second Kyle's motion.
Okay. So we have a motion to accept the conditions of the new changes to the conditional use permit as proposed, with the addition or change on item 36 that we take a look at this, the standing committee take a look at information provided every 6 months as opposed to annually. We have a second on that motion from Vice Chair Baumann. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Goodkind.
I just want to note for the record that I cannot support any motion that includes the ID system. I understand this is a negotiated resolution. I appreciate all the work that's gone into it, and I appreciate Brother Benno's acceptance of the condition and the fact that they're going to move forward with an ID card system. But as a matter of policy and principle, I cannot support that kind of government overreach. I don't think it's in the city's business to tell a nonprofit how to run their business, and we don't have any business with the ID system. So unfortunately, I cannot support any motion that will include that, so I will be voting no. I do appreciate everybody's work, though, and thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Again, we have a motion and it's been second. Any additional comments? Seeing
Mr.
none.
Chairman, could I get clarification on the revision? I understood that the initial report shall be within 6 months, and then there was some discussion after that. It could be a year, so should we say
6 months.
the initial reports will be within 6 months?
6 months, and then we go from there. So if
Okay.
at 6 months, it looks like it's going good, and we decide, let's just go every year then, we can go back. But since it's such a hot issue right now with all this stuff going on, I think it's important we just stay focused on it and make sure everybody's tracking the right way.
Okay, and we'll have to revise the resolution, and we'll leave it up to your chairman to review that and assure that it meets the motion.
Okay, I'll do that. I think I have a gist of what we want to try to do here. So, Commissioner Custer?
I was going to go for more discussion. I think discussion is ended and we're on to clarification only, so I'll pass.
Okay, I think we've covered the discussion. We have a motion and a second, so I'll go around and ask for the votes. Starting on my right, Commissioner, I'll start with the maker of the motion, Commissioner Crejo.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Busk?
Aye.
Commissioner Morrissey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Baumann?
Yes?
Commissioner Custer?
Yes.
Commissioner Goodkind?
No.
And I vote yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, we'll record that as 6 in favor, 1 against. Commissioner Goodkind, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Could I have a,
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Good.
so we will appoint the standing committee at a future meeting?
We didn't include that in our agenda, but that would seem reasonable, that we tee this up and ask for new participants for the standing commission or standing committee at a later date. Trying to get organized here. Give me a second. Okay. Moving along then to public hearing item number 5. Consideration of a local coastal program amendment, LCP 20-001, and a municipal code amendment to Chapter 7. The applicant here is the city of Oceanside. The property is a cannabis facility, well, not property. What we're talking about this evening on this item is a cannabis facilities code amendment. I'll open up for disclosures. To my left, Commissioner Custer.
Read the report.
Thank you. That would also be the limit of my disclosures. I read the report. Vice Chair Obama.
I also read the report.
Commissioner Morrissey.
Read the report.
Commissioner Busk.
Ditto.
Commissioner Goodkind.
Read the report.
And Commissioner Crayhill.
Yeah, same, nothing to disclose.
Thank you. We'll start with a presentation by Stephanie Cervantes. Go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Cervantes with the Planning Division, and I will be presenting the Cannabis Facility Municipal Code Amendment and Local Coastal Program Amendment 21-00001. The Municipal Code Amendment includes two main changes. The first is to address odor control. Odor is one of the biggest concerns to the public when it comes to cannabis facilities. Currently, the city code allows denial or revocation of a local license if odors impact adjacent properties. While the city can start the revocation process of the local license at any time, that process is lengthy and does allow for appeals. The second part of the amendment is in regards to the local license status. Section 7.119 states that a facility must obtain a local license first and then a conditional use permit. The proposed text amendment would add a section to the city code regarding odor control devices and techniques and where odor is not allowed, which includes anywhere on adjacent properties on public right-of-way, in the exterior or interior common areas, walkways, hallways, breezeways, foyers, lobby areas, or any other area that is used by common tenants or visitors. The proposed language would also allow for a site inspection to identify any odor issues and allow the facility to correct the problem. The proposed amendment regarding the local license status makes it clear that a valid and active local license is needed during the conditional use permit process and in order for the city to grant a CUP approval. The proposed tax amendment requires an amendment to the local coastal program and certification from the California Coastal Commission. It is important to note that there are no cannabis facilities allowed within the coastal zone. This is just administrative. At this time, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the Municipal Code Amendment and Local Coastal Program Amendment to the City Council. Thank you. I am available for questions, and we also did receive a few requests from the public.
Thank you, Stephanie. City Planner, any requests to speak on this item from the public?
Mr. Chairman, we have, I believe, 4 or 5. So there's no questions of staff at this point, is that correct?
Go ahead, Commissioner Busk. Yes.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
How long does it normally take for one of these facilities to get a CUP?
Commissioner Busk, Commissioners, the CUP process is really dependent on the applicant, on how quickly they can turn around and address any comments and concerns. As of right now, most cannabis CUPs are taking anywhere from about 9 to 18 months to get through the review process.
So with this proposal, we're requiring them to hold a valid license, which is only good for a year, for 1 to 2 years before they have a CUP and then can start their business.
Yes, the local license needs to be renewed on an annual basis, whether the facility is operating or not.
Thank you.
Commissioner Goodkind.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Vallis. Stephanie, could you explain the sequencing with these requirements, city versus state? So it's a little bit complicated. The city, the city requires a license, then the conditional use permit, but it's obviously tied to the state license process. So what is the sequence for an applicant going through those steps? I know that we had an applicant at one time where this was confusing, and so I would appreciate your clarification.
Commissioner Goodkind, commissioners, yes. So a facility would initially submit a local license application, which would be issued by the city manager's office. Once they have obtained that original local license, they are invited to apply for a conditional use permit. At that time, they're also notified that they may start the state licensing process. The state, they have what's called a provisional license as well as an annual license. So once the state has notified the city, the local jurisdiction, the facility may obtain a provisional license. However, that license, because the city has not approved a conditional use permit, that license cannot be used until the facility has obtained the conditional use process as well as, has obtained a conditional use permit as well as obtained a business license. So the facilities do have to obtain several different licenses. There's several steps that they have to go through.
Okay, thank you. My second question for you is, in the report, it talks about how you guys researched odor control ordinances around the state and the country, and ultimately concluded that, let's see, where is it? At this time, staff does not believe that a citywide odor nuisance ordinance is warranted and has focused on the cannabis industry. So I'm just curious why we've decided to focus only on the cannabis industry when there are obviously other industries that also have odor issues, such as, for instance, like auto paint shops. Maybe you could address that and explain that reasoning?
Yes, Commissioner Goodkind. So the concern came to the city as a cannabis odor concern. That's one of the main reasons we focused on cannabis control. One of the reasons why we, at this time, we're not proposing a citywide ordinance is we have not been directed to do so at this time. Going that process of doing a citywide odor nuisance ordinance would potentially require the city to go out and hire a consultant in order to be able to draft an ordinance that would address not only cannabis, but also all other industries within our jurisdiction that may produce odors. It would also require training of staff. We would need to determine if we do want to use the nasal ranger, do more research on that specific process if we want to do it citywide. As you're probably aware, there are many industries within the city that potentially produce odors, not just industrial, but also farming operations. So it would be something very wide-ranging that staff would need to look at and could potentially need outside assistance from expert.
Okay, and my final question for you, speaking of outside assistance and consultants, was the city advised by its cannabis consultant about the odor issue prior to this amendment being developed? I'm just wondering why this hasn't come up, because it's a common issue in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that our cannabis consultant, HDL, did help draft the municipal code as it's originally written, which does have some odor control regulations at that time. I don't know the full history of why it was not furthered at that point, but the proposed language that we're bringing forward now was written in consultation with HDL, and they are very familiar with this type of issue. They have drafted very similar language for many other jurisdictions within the state and across the country in order to address this issue.
Thank you so much for answering my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions for staff at this point? Let's see, maybe we can come back to Stephanie if there are any additional ones. Otherwise, let's go to the public.
Mr. Chairman, our first speaker is Erica Leary.
Ms. Leary, go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Erica Leary. I am the program manager for the North Coastal Prevention Coalition and a resident of Oceanside. And it appears that this move would be in the positive direction. We have become aware of other cities up in Santa Barbara County where odors are very dramatic, impacting resident lives, school children, lawsuits are being filed. And as Oceanside is just getting started and approving these kinds of businesses, having a plan to address odor and protect residents and neighbors seems like a good move. My question is, how is odor going to be defined? And is it just subjective? If anybody complains, does that count? And then the city can take remedy. And if it's not just by a single complaint, then who gets to decide if the odor is being an impact to neighbors, or even with coastal winds that can be carried quite a distance? So I'm just asking for a clarification on if it becomes an issue, the exact steps that can be remedied for those that are impacted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Leary. We'll try to answer your question when we bring it back to the commission.
The next speaker is Judy Strang.
Hello, good evening. Judy Strang here. I'm a mother and grandmother in the city of Oceanside and have expressed my concern about the quality of air and the smell of marijuana. So I appreciate the staff's work on bringing this forward. I too would like to add some questions for your consideration. It seems to me that the issues around code enforcement for this particular item are a little on the sketchy side. We had a family experience with this very issue where a building where our grandchildren were practicing volleyball was right next door to a manufacturer. This is down in San Diego. And it was a horrid smell for the teens. And we did report it to the city of San Diego's code enforcement. And they were told that they put it on their list, but it was a low priority for them. So I would like to understand what the city of Oceanside will have in place so that if there were a complaint, that we'd have some sense of whether we would feel the public's voices could be heard. And then just one other question. I noticed for the application of, and I guess in this case, manufacturing, but cultivation as well, that the applications are graded as to how they're going to handle smell. But that's all it said. There's no grading scale, there's no measurement. So I'd also like to add that question. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll try to answer those questions. Coming up, next speaker.
The next speaker is Kelly McCormick.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Thank you for your time. My name is Kelly McCormick. I'm a parent and I run a youth mentoring program. And I also support odor regulations. It's absolutely necessary for businesses and neighbors to have some sort of official avenue to be able to complain about odors and have the situation investigated and remedied. And I was interested in the question about was this information shared by DL prior to the original ordinance being written? And I know that having attended many of the ad hoc committee meetings, odor concerns were brought up over and over again during public comments during the ad hoc committee. So the information was out there. The public had raised those concerns before this ordinance, the original ordinance, was even written. So please move forward with this, and please have strong remediation when businesses are violating the ordinance rules. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rebecca Rapp.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Becky Rapp. I'm here tonight to thank staff for bringing this item to the forefront of our minds, as this is a huge concern and reoccurring issue among residents. I strongly encourage you to approve this ordinance. It's no secret, odor is a nuisance. In fact, the smell of marijuana is far more poignant than other businesses creating odor. Marijuana manufacturers should be held responsible for the disruption and negative effects they have on residents' quality of life. More often than not, marijuana odor is reported to local law enforcement, and they have no way to enforce odor control. By updating the current policy, it would place responsibility on the marijuana business owner to rectify the situation. Residents move to Oceanside for the lovely ocean breeze that flows through the city. That horrible marijuana smell will carry across the city, negatively affecting residents and businesses. With restaurants required to provide outdoor dining, this is just another setback they will have to deal with. Please decide to move forward with increasing policy and protecting the citizens of Oceanside. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rapp.
Our last speaker is Carol Green.
Ms. Green?
Mr. Chairman, we can't find her on the participants list. If she has some way of raising a hand or letting us know, perhaps her name is on the participant list is different.
Is it Ms. Green? Is that what you said?
Carol Green?
Carol Green. Carol Green, if you can hear us and you'd like to address the commission and you're using some other means or we don't see your name there, maybe you're one of the phone numbers, can you raise your hand? I don't see any hands raised, do you?
We don't either.
Okay. Okay, then you said that was our last speaker? Okay. Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission. Stephanie, I heard a couple of questions from the input we received. I heard two of them that I recall. How is odor defined? And then she didn't articulate it this way, but this is how I wrote this one. What's the code enforcement protocol and how are things graded? So.
Commissioner Rosales, commissioners, because the city is not proposing at this point to use a device such as the nasal ranger, which would use a threshold, the odor control, if there is a complaint, would be somewhat subjective by code enforcement staff and or our consultant team that would do the on-site inspections. As the code proposal reads, there's no odor allowed on adjacent properties or the public right-of-way. So it would be if the human can smell it. If complaints are received, complaints can either go to code enforcement or to our cannabis direct lines as well. And we would address it at that time. At this point, we suspect that it would be a joint effort between code enforcement staff and our HDL staff in order to go do those inspections when complaints are received.
And what would the remedy be? Maybe we're too far out on this, but what would the possible remedy be if we went through an investigation and found that, yes, there were odors?
Yeah, so according to our cannabis consultant, HDL, one of the reasons that, or the main reason that there's odors coming from a facility tends to be human error. Usually it's employees leaving doors open that they're not supposed to be leaving open, cannabis waste not being stored properly, or cannabis waste not being picked up often enough. So those on-site inspections would identify the issue and allow the facility to correct that. So it would either be reinforcing to employees that they can't leave XYZ doors open, or changing their waste pickup so that it's picked up more often or better secured. Most of the time that's the issue. It's not necessarily that the facility has not implemented proper measures, because they had to go through an application process, especially a building permit process that also checks for that type of building security when releasing air pressures and things like that. So it's usually a human error, an error that the facility is not properly operating their management plan.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. So these are normal working areas, manufacturing areas. Are there any mechanical odor containment or scrubbing systems that are part of the development or not?
Most of the facilities have proposed some sort of mechanical equipment, whether it's enhanced HVAC systems, scrubbers. That's been reviewed as part of the local license and then ensured that it's implemented as part of the building permit process. There's also a lot of new techniques. The cultivation industry is currently using a spraying and misting technique that helps control odors. So part of the reason that this ordinance is not very prescriptive is to allow technology to advance. So the misting is a new technology that's just come out in the last few years. I'm sure in the future there'll be additional technologies that these facilities can implement just based on how quickly this industry is moving.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from staff?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just elaborate a little bit, it's important to recognize that Oceanside's ordinance only provides for cannabis indoors, even cultivation. So it's a lot easier to assure odor isn't escaping from the site. It's not just an open field, which would be challenging. So with a building, there's mechanical options, and the solution would be to review those mechanical features and make sure they're functioning, along with operational actions, as Stephanie mentioned.
Great. Vice Chair Obama?
Yeah, the reference to Santa Barbara and the farmers up there, they were allowed to grow cannabis in just regular greenhouses with not any kind of odor kind of devices. And so it permeated everywhere, and everyone got into a big, huge thing over it. And there's a lot of lawsuits because of that. But I'm sure that the way that's perfected now, like we just had an applicant last commission that has, like Stephanie was explaining, the fogger kind of misty kind of thing that they use. So it's going to be something it's going to be controlled. And also the CUP is very expensive for these guys to obtain. They're not going to jeopardize all this expense that they've put into with something like, hopefully the door just gets left open, they can close it, and it's going to move on from that. But one question I have, though, in Southmore Hills, we are allowed to grow hemp, and we also have cannabis, and they both have the same smell. And we actually did have a couple farmers that have actually grown hemp in our neighborhood, and it does, you can smell it, but it's not like it's perforated the whole neighborhood, and we live up there with fields of hemp. But how are you, the city, going to differentiate? Because now we have people up there going to be growing cannabis inside of greenhouses, and we have a hemp farmer that's growing in the air, and it both smells the same. So is there going to be hopefully some way you guys can say, okay, that smells over here, and this smells coming over here? Because it might come up. I don't know if it will, but it's just a heads up kind of a thing. Have you thought about that?
Commissioner Balma, at this time, I have not put a lot of thought into that. It might be one of the reasons that the city might consider a citywide odor nuisance in the odor nuisance ordinance in the future. At this time, we're just focusing on cannabis. Because all our facilities are in enclosed, secured buildings, I think it'll be easier to be able to go to a site and identify if that odor is coming from that licensed facility or not. But I do understand that industrial hemp is a very similar crop. We do allow it in the city of Oceanside, and it produces very similar odor.
Well, if no one else has any comments, I would offer a motion. Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, and commissioners online, anything from Commissioner Cahill? Okay, see nodding in the head, no. Commissioner Busk, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to revisit this CUP process just for a bit. How long does it take to get a license?
The local license takes a few months.
A few months, and how much does it cost?
Mr. Chairman, while she's researching that, in response to Louise's comment, the city treats industrial hemp as an agricultural product. And like a lot of agricultural products, there's odors involved with that. This is a different product. This is cannabis, which is a different plant. And so it is subject to a different set of regulations. As Stephanie noted, that with a building, hopefully there's some ability to determine that, well, that odor is only around this building and it's not in the entire neighborhood. And if it's just around the building, then it might point to that particular building. So.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Commissioner Buss, the local license fee is $8,452.
And is there any reason why local licensing and the CUP process won't run concurrently? Why are you asking an applicant to run those sequentially? You're asking someone to pay $8,000 to $16,000 for a 2-year process to get a CUP, maybe more, in addition to the CUP cost. So why is that not sequential? Why is that sequential? Why do you require a license before you can even start your CUP process?
Chairman and commissioners, I mean, the snarky answer would be that's what council adopted. Now, why they adopted that, we have to look at the different processes. And the local licenses is focused more on business operations. The business operations include security plans, maintenance and operations plans, which address odor, background checks, et cetera. So the process that the city has is, if you get through that, including the background checks, then you're allowed to go to a conditional use permit. The conditional use permit process, as most of you are aware, is site-specific. Is this site going to cause impacts to the neighbors? So they're kind of different operations. I suppose you could set them up to be concurrent, but that's not how the city's current process is.
So this process is actually used currently with other business licenses and CUPs as well?
Which process?
The process of getting first a business license and then a CUP. Other businesses do that as well?
Stephanie, you probably know more about the business licenses.
No, so this is a cannabis-specific local license that needs to be obtained first. Once that's obtained, the facility, the applicant is invited to apply for the conditional use permit. The local license is not a business license. Once the facility is ready to operate, then they apply for their regular business license like any other business in the city.
But the city council has already adopted this process, you say?
Yes, we have a local license process in place. We have issued, I don't know, a dozen local licenses?
Closer to 20, I believe.
20. And now we're in the process of the second step where they're invited or allowed to apply for a conditional use permit. Not all of them have, as I understand, Stephanie.
That's correct.
So some of them don't take it to the next step, but that's the city's process, is first you get a local license. And what Stephanie was alluding to, one of the revisions is not only do you have to get a local license, you have to maintain it. If you'll recall with one of our applicants, they had a local license that was in suspension, and they argued, well, we had a local license, and that's what your ordinance says. You just have to obtain a local license. So we're saying, no, you have to obtain it and maintain it. So that's one of the revisions along with the odor.
So basically, this is a clarification of a current policy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions for staff or a motion or whatever?
I'll make a motion if everybody else is okay with that, and our Zoom commissioners are okay with that. Then I'd like to say we will adopt the Planning Commission Resolution number 2021 P10, recommending to City Council approval of Municipal Code Amendment and Local Coastal Plan Amendment, LCPA 21-0001, with the findings of approval herein.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Vice Chair Bauman, a second by Commissioner Morrissey. Any further discussion? Not seeing any hands raised. We will go to a vote. I'll start on my left. Commissioner Custer,
I'll vote yes.
Commissioner Busk,
Yes.
Commissioner Morrissey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bama,
Yes.
Commissioner Crayhill,
Yes.
and Commissioner Goodkind.
I am yes, but I would like to see a citywide odor ordinance evaluated, but I'm definitely a yes. Thank you.
Thank you, and I am a yes.
And we'll record that as 7 in favor, 0 against. The motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Oh, you're staying. You're doing the next item too, I see. Next item for consideration is item 6, consideration of a conditional use permit, 2 of them actually. Request to operate a medical cannabis manufacturing and distribution facility within the existing building at 2949 San Luis Rey Road, which is in the airport neighborhood planning area. The applicant is Mohammed Saab, representing Bud Ease LLC. Disclosures, Commissioner Custer?
Drove by the site and read the report.
Vice Chair Bama?
I also drove by the site, read the report, and I actually went to that restaurant when it was a restaurant.
Commissioner Morrissey?
Read the report.
Commissioner Busk?
I read the report, made a site visit a couple of times.
Commissioner Goodkind?
Site visit and read the report.
And Commissioner Crayhill?
I have nothing more to disclose. Yeah, good.
I did a site visit and read the report. Looks like we have Stephanie Cervantes on this item too. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Cervantes with the Planning Division, and I'll be presenting conditional use permits 19-00015 and 19-00016 and a waiver of locational requirements for a medical manufacturing and distribution facility located at 2949 San Luis Rey Road. Thank you. The project site is located on San Luis Rey Road between Via del Norte and Via del Monte. The site has a general plan designation of light industrial and a zoning designation of limited industrial, and is surrounded by limited industrial to the north, south, and west, and residential to the east. Here is an aerial of the site, and you can see the residential on the other side of Mission Avenue. The project proposes to operate a medical cannabis manufacturing and distribution facility within the existing building. The proposal will add about 500 square feet, and it proposes interior and exterior tenant improvements as well as site improvements. The project site is requesting a waiver of location requirements due to its proximity to a residential district as well as another regulated use. Here is the proposed site plan. The project proposal includes upgrade to security fencing, restriping of the parking lot, construction of a trash enclosure, and new landscaping. This is the proposed floor plan. With the addition, the building footprint is about 1,800 square feet. The interior includes a secured lobby, an employee area, extraction lab, distribution area, and storage. The project will not have any emissions or impacts. The facility is not open to the public, so it will not increase loitering, foot, or vehicle traffic. The building is 68 feet to the nearest residential district and about 200 feet to another regulated use. Building to building, the distance is about 158 feet to the nearest residential use on East Barnwell. Via pedestrian path, that distance is about 1/3 of a mile. Both this use and the existing regulated use are not open to the public and will not create customer impact. And the uses will not be detrimental to public health or safety, and staff believes that the waiver of locational requirements is warranted. The facility is required to participate in the state's track and trace system and is required to obtain licenses from the California Department of Public Health, Manufactured Cannabis Safety Branch, as well as the California Bureau of Cannabis Control for distribution. The facility is also required to renew their local license on an annual basis. The facility did conduct enhanced notification of the project by sending out questionnaires in March and April of 2020 and received 7 responses, which were attached to the staff report. Staff did not receive any comments on this item. However, there are a number of requests to speak during the public comment portion. At this time, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution approving conditional use permit and waiver of locational criteria to allow a medical cannabis manufacturing and distribution facility at 2949 San Luis Rey Road. Thank you. I'm available for questions, and the applicant has also prepared a presentation.
Stephanie, would you bring that back up and go back a couple of slides to the one that has the distance between a regulated use? Go back one more. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to look at this again. Okay, thank you. Any questions for Stephanie?
I just wanted to make a clarification. I know that on our staff report in the city's website, there were several letters of approval when they did their, I guess they did their outreach to the neighbors, and there was maybe 6 or 7 that I saw of people that were in favor of this. So there was some.
That's correct. That's the response that the applicant received to their enhanced notification.
Commissioner Goodkind or Crahill, anything? No? Okay. We'll go to the applicant, Mr. Saab, if he is on the line and would like to, I see him there. Mr. Saab, good evening. You heard Stephanie's presentation. I don't know if you have your own presentation or just want to be available for any questions.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, Planning Commission. We have James from Integrated Labs. He's going to be our, he's going to provide the presentation for everyone.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
It's different. He has a different link.
Okay, give us a second while we work this out.
Is he asking to share screen?
Oh, there it goes.
Good evening. My name is James. I'm with Integrated Lab Builders. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, no. I think we're trying to make it available on our end, so give us a minute.
Okay, thank you.
The applicant needs to share screen on your own Zoom app. We've allowed you to share screen from here.
Share screen.
Oh, there we go. Go ahead. We see it now.
Okay, thank you for bearing with me. Well, good evening, esteemed council and members of the community. My name is James. I'm with Integrated Lab Builders. We're a design build contractor serving Southern California. We're presenting tonight on behalf of Buddies, which is a cannabis production facility. Our promise to you is to bring value to your community in an environmentally conscious manner with around-the-clock security. Buddies is a non-volatile medical cannabis manufacturing and wholesale distribution company serving the North County, San Diego area. Our vicinity map and buffer exhibit overlay illustrates our proximity to our neighbors with 500 and 1,000 foot radius from our site. You can see from our exhibit that traveling from the nearest residential neighborhood to our facility requires traveling northeast along Mission Avenue, crossing Mission Avenue to reach San Luis Rey Road, and traveling back southwest the same distance, a trip totaling approximately 2,500 feet. This exhibit shows the obstructed view from our site from the nearest residential area. Standing on Mission, the site is completely obstructed from view. Please note the palm tree in the middle of the screen for orientation of the site. That palm tree is directly in front of our building. The existing site and frontage stand out because the surrounding businesses are actively conducting commerce and maintaining their properties. The existing site has a vacant structure that has fallen into disrepair and a site with cracked and broken pavement, which creates an eyesore on the neighborhood. Our proposed site plan and frontage dramatically improve the visual appeal of the property and contribute to the community's overall beautification. This site is secure. We have 17 CCTV security cameras located throughout the property, inside and out, which are monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by an armed security guard. Bear with me while we get back onto the screen here. All right, here we are. There are a total of 8 exterior cameras and 9 interior cameras. These cameras are situated to observe entry and exit points, as well as observe production methods. The only monitored rooms on the property are the restroom and the locker rooms. All doors are access controlled by a 24-hour armed security guard who monitors the cameras. They also have a panic button that's linked directly to the police to be pressed in the event of emergency so they can be alerted and respond immediately. All wastewater from cleaning of utensils, apparatus, washing of hands, production equipment, any water that comes into contact with any part of the production is captured and stored so a hazardous waste recycling company can haul it away and dispose of it in an environmentally friendly manner. None of this water goes into the city's wastewater system. There's an inspection handhole in line with the wastewater lateral line that connects to the city's sanitation system for inspections. This is to allow verification by city officials that no waste from the production process finds its way into the city's sanitation system. Waste plant material from the extraction process, called biomass, is contained in a secure location inside the building to be hauled away by an outside hazardous waste company. The food grade non-volatile extraction process takes place inside of a closed loop cryoethanol extraction system for botanical oils inside of a Class 1 Division 2 environment. Through use of the Apollo X still process and equipment, which was designed for industrial scale botanical extraction and purification. Deliveries of raw materials and shipments of finished products all take place during typical daytime business hours between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. under video and armed guard surveillance. The owners and operators, brothers Mohammed and Omar Saab, they both have Bachelor's of Science degrees in business management and have experience operating cannabis extraction and distribution facilities. Both owners have operated in the cannabis industry since 2015 and began lab testing cannabis before it was required to ensure their medical patients had access to clean medicine. Both owners have lived in Oceanside for the past 10 years and are a part of the community they want to operate in. This concludes our presentation. I'm available for questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions for the applicant's representative? I can't see Commissioners Goodkind or Crayhill. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the public. Do we have any slips to speak on this item from the public?
Mr. Chairman, we have 7 speakers.
Okay, go ahead and start.
The first speaker is Barbara Gordon.
Go ahead, Ms. Gordon.
Do we have her?
You can turn off shared screen under security.
We're trying to get rid of the screen. There we go. I'm sorry, was that Gordon or Jordan?
Barbara Gordon with a G.
Barbara Gordon, you're our first speaker, if you can hear us. Do we see her on the list? Perhaps one of the other numbers. Ms. Gordon, if you can hear us, but we can't see your name on the list, maybe you can raise your hand. Let's come back to Ms. Gordon. Let's go to the next speaker.
The next speaker is Erica Leary.
Ms. Leary, go ahead.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. It's Erica Leary here again, the Program Manager for the North Coastal Prevention Coalition and a resident of Oceanside. This commission has noted previously that rules about cannabis businesses were developed, but every single business application that comes before you requires a locational waiver, and this is yet another one. This location is only 68 feet from a residential district and only 200 feet from another cannabis business. So the rules about not having a density of cannabis businesses is being ignored. It's increasingly clear that the zoning rules that were developed by the city and staff and approved are simply being rewritten with each application that comes before the city. And the findings that permit these locational waivers seem very weak on a factual basis. To say that there's no negative impact with traffic or loitering, we don't know because these businesses haven't opened yet. The one that you approved previously, Left Coast by my house, is not operational, so we don't know what the community impacts are going to be. And on a separate note, while this body doesn't consider the actual products that will be made and distributed, I think that lacks transparency for the public of Oceanside. We were led to believe that the city had a desire to allow medical cannabis and that would be a benefit for consumers. And yet I'm not aware of any medical studies that show high potency vaping products help people. And I am aware of many studies that document the risks and harms, especially to youth. It impacts lung health associated with the Valley vaping crisis, impacts mental health, and even heart health. So the business plans for what is actually going to be manufactured and distributed and how it's going to be marketed in our communities should be part of this application and review process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leary. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Judy Strang.
Ms. Strang.
Good evening, planning commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to share some concerns our family has regarding this location. We talked about it at family dinner last night, and my family was really surprised that they would plop a marijuana business down in this area where there were several small, more than several, 6 to 10 small businesses that are also trying to do business in that area. We're wondering how disruptive it would be. But my greater concern is that my son sent me some pictures from the site today because I was curious as how anybody would even know a business was going in around them, these small businesses, and what was the signage like. Well, there's only one large sign, and it does say it's going to be manufacturing and distribution, but it doesn't say of what. And I think in this particular case, since the product is marijuana, it's really important that everyone around that area know for sure what it is that's going to happen in that building. So I'd like to make that recommendation going forward, that the signage is more clear, especially since this is a controversial and divisive issue. And then I'd like to close with this similar concern to the previous speaker regarding the items upon which the waiver of locational requirements is made, or are made, they're plural, and there were 5 of them listed in the staff report. And number 1, for those of us who really worry about the quality of life in our neighborhood, is that this proposed use will not be contrary to the public interest. Well, again, I echo her comments. How do we know? How could anyone make a determination like that if there's no history of these businesses yet operating in the city of Oceanside? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strang. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Kelly McCormick.
Good evening. This is Kelly McCormick, and I would like to express my concern about yet another waiver being considered for a marijuana business. It seems like this is becoming a common procedure rather than a rarity, and it violates the spirit of the regulations when they were put in place. And the reasons for these, distance separations is to protect the public. And having it this close to a residential zone is not protecting the public. So I would ask you to please deny this waiver and uphold the regulations on distance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Margaret Walker. Mr. Chairman, we don't see her on the participant list.
Ms. Walker, we don't see you on the list. Perhaps you're one of the phone numbers. If you are, if you could, I don't know how you raise your hand if you're on the phone, but if there's some other means for you to acknowledge that you are actually wanting to have some input, we're looking for you.
We don't see anything in the chat room either.
Okay. Thank you. Well, then we'll go to the next speaker.
The next speaker is Rebecca Rapp.
Ms. Rapp, go ahead.
She's not in there now. Mr. Chairman, she was I believe a speaker in the previous item, but she's not on our participant list anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I recall her name from the last item. Are there any more speakers?
The last speaker is Carol Green.
Ms. Green?
She was not on the previous list, was she?
This is Barbara Gordon. I couldn't unmute myself, so I was wondering if I could also speak at one point.
Yeah, Ms. Gordon, since we have you on, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. It wouldn't. I tried to do it, but it wouldn't do it. Finally, it did. Thank you. Again, Barbara Gordon. The decisions made by planning commissions are important, and they have implications to Oceanside residents. The district required for marijuana businesses of 1,000 feet from residents and use-sensitive areas were made because of the potential negative impacts these types of businesses can have in a community. This proposed business is only 65 feet to the nearest residential district and 200 feet from another marijuana outlet, which seems problematic. At one point, does it become oversaturated with these types of businesses? Every marijuana business that comes before you has been granted a waiver of location request. Why have a distance requirement if you're not going to follow the policy and grant waivers for all of these businesses? This seems to be a slippery slope. I want to thank the Planning Commission for addressing the odor control concerns, which is often the issue neighbors and other businesses have to contend with. What takes place in the surrounding communities needs to be a priority for all city decisions. Properties' values can be affected when you have high-risk businesses. The purpose of these restrictions is to ensure public health, safety, and general welfare of those living near the project. Oceanside residents are counting on you to have their best interest and not the marijuana industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Any other speakers? Or we come back to some of the ones we missed?
Mr. Chairman, we did not hear from Margaret Walker.
Okay, does that complete our list of speakers?
And we did not hear from Rebecca Rapp.
Okay.
We did not hear from Carol Green.
Okay. Very good, then we will close the public hearing and bring it back for either questions to the applicant or staff or comments. I'll start off. First, I'll say that the proposed development of this property from the slides and presentation anyway suggests, an improvement of the appearance of the property for sure, and then the security portions, everything they put into it, they put some thought into it, I should say. And so I appreciate that. There were several references to ongoing waivers for site locations, and so that really should be addressed. And so I'll turn that into a question for staff. What's our thinking here on this example or any others? Because I think several comments that we've heard are correct. We keep seeing requests for waivers, and lots of thought was given to how these rules were set up in the first place, and if we're not going to adhere to them or consider waivers all the time, I guess we would need to understand what the thinking is tonight, at least on this one, but any others too.
Mr. Chairman, let me give a little background, and then I'll turn it over to Stephanie for some specifics. First of all, on page 5 of your staff report, you have your findings that you have to make in order to grant a waiver. So it's not just an opinion or an option that you can just make up. You have to present findings. When staff reviews these requests for waivers, we go through these 5 findings and try and make a determination as to whether they meet those or not. In my experience as a city planner with the city of Oceanside, we have only we've only denied one waiver of locational requirements. And that was for a tattoo parlor, establishment that was literally adjacent to a residential district. The council, when they adopted the medical cannabis ordinance, they were aware of it being a regulated use. And at one point, they had a requirement, or there was discussion, about having a separation between the same businesses for the same site, which wouldn't work. And so they made it clear that, well, no, you don't have to have a buffer or locational distance for 2 cannabis businesses on the same site. That's one example. That's what's happening here. There's a manufacturing and a distribution. So they felt that, well, even though technically those are 2 regulated uses, we're not going to require a buffer. The other one is it was in agriculture. And Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but in agriculture, there was originally a requirement for a buffer, and then they removed it, I think. So the council has made decisions as to whether a waiver of locational requirements is allowed or not. In this particular site, well, let me turn it over to Stephanie with that background, and she can go through the specifics for this particular site.
Yes, I just wanted to add some background too. So when City Council initially adopted the ordinance, it did require a strict that these facilities would not be allowed to apply for a waiver of locational requirements, and that was later changed. So in 2018, they made the change to allow the waiver of locational requirements for cannabis facilities. One of the reasons that was allowed was because when you map industrial properties and then you put all the buffers around it, it limited where these facilities could go. Because most of our industrial districts are next to residential districts, we allow churches in many of our industrial districts as well, and childcare facilities. So it really limited where in our city these facilities could go. So council decided to change that and allow cannabis facilities to apply for a waiver on a case-by-case basis. So that is the reason why these facilities are allowed to do so now. For this specific site, the facility is proposing security, which will ensure that there's fencing, there's going to be cameras, there's going to be guards, which will essentially take care of any security issues that the public may have. The facilities that are licensed and legal facilities, if they do have any sort of issues with theft, they can report it to police departments and have those things addressed. Compared to some illegal facilities, which is usually the problem when those are victims of robbery. They're illegal facilities, they can't report it to anyone. So that's where you see a lot of the issues when it comes to security, is the illegal facilities. Our legal licensed facilities are required to have on-guard cameras. They can report any issues to the city, to police department. These facilities are also not open to the public, so you will not see people lining up. You will not see cars coming to the site. It's a distribution facility. It's a wholesale distribution. They will distribute only to other manufacturing facilities or to retail locations. It's not a distribution to patients. So it really helps limit all those issues that you could potentially see with this type of business. As well as their operational, we've addressed cannabis odors, but it addresses all the other issues that may cause public concern in terms of odors or water safety, things like that as well. So their operation has been vetted extremely through the local license process as well as the conditional use permit process.
Great, thank you for that explanation, City Planner and Stephanie. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Commissioner Crayhill? No? Okay. Commissioner Buss, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to do a little follow-up on that same issue on the location requirements. Would our police department prefer to have these marijuana facilities located in the same area of the city, like pushed together, or would they rather have them spread apart across the city? And the reason I ask that question is these all operate on a cash basis, which makes them more prone to robbery. And we've seen some horrific robberies not in California that I know of, but in Colorado, for example. So what is OPD's position on congregating these kinds of operations?
Commissioner Busk, I'm not sure what OPD's position is on the spreading out or concentration of these facilities. I will note that the state is currently looking to change some of the financial regulations. They are working with financial institutions to be able to allow these facilities to bank with financial institutions that are known, so that they don't have to operate on a cash-only basis. And again, when it comes to safety, robbery, things like that, the legal licensed locations don't tend to have such a problem with that because they can go to police departments and report that. They have security footage that they can easily turn over to police departments to have reports to try to track this down, compared to the illegal operators that cannot turn to police departments for obvious reasons.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Obama? Yes, sir. Yeah, turn on your mic. There you go.
Something that we should mention on this specific site, as noted in the staff report and even some of our public, it is only 68 feet away from a residential district. But I think the applicant did a good job. And Stephanie, maybe you could pull up the site plan. To actually walk from that residence to the site, first of all, to walk directly, which is how the 68 feet is measured, you'd have to go down a slope, scale a fence, run across Mission Avenue, and down a slope, and then go to the site. So to actually walk to it, you have to go all the way up, and I forget what the cross street is, where the signal is, and then come all the way back, and it's
I think
over
it was
1,000 feet or
2,500 feet, I heard at one point.
So that's the kind of analysis that staff does, that, yeah, it is only 68 feet as a crow flies, but we're not protecting crows, we're protecting children. The other, and I think it's in the staff report, is that the signage for cannabis facilities is very minimal. So for the average person driving by, I'm not sure can even say cannabis, can it? So. And finally, as Stephanie noted, but it's worth repeating, the public's not allowed on these sites. So it's not like the school kids are all going to congregate down there and wait for the store to open or something. It's enough said.
No, and I appreciate that. I mean, and I appreciate you clarifying that your staff does this analysis. The 68 feet isn't quite 68 feet. And I think that helps in understanding that these aren't just sort of arbitrarily and just, with a wave of the hand, they happen. No, you definitely put some thought to it, so I appreciate that. Vice Chair Obama, you had a question?
I just had a question. Stephanie, the other operation, Metleaf, that's just a couple doors down or just one door down, is that one in operation currently, or just they're actually going through their process?
Commissioner Ballman, Commissioners, that facility did start operations summer of last year.
They have, because I just noticed when I was there driving around, and I probably parked right at that facility when I was looking at the proposed site, because there wasn't any, like this one's got landscaping and fencing and security cameras, and I could definitely, this is definitely secure. The other one didn't seem like anything was even there. I mean, it is stealth, like you said, they don't want to put signs up, but so that's an operation, but there wasn't anything required of them to have anything special like landscaping or anything like that.
No, the landscaping requirements are not triggered because Medleaf was not doing any sort of addition to that building. They were just going to use the existing building footprint. They weren't doing any interior tenant improvements to that building either. So Medleaf does have security fencing that starts at the face of the building, not at the property line. So when you first drive into that building, the front parking is open. Essentially, it would seem it's open to the public, but it's private property. And they do have security cameras on both sides of the building, and I believe they also have a security camera pointing at that front door as well.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Don't see any. We've concluded the public. Sometimes I forget where I am. We've concluded the public input, staff. Okay, motion. Looks like we're at that point. Would somebody like to make a motion or continue dialogue? I'll entertain either.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, Commissioner Goodkind.
Okay, excuse my dog barking in the background. I will move to confirm issuance of a Class 1 categorical exemption per the California Environmental Quality Act Article 19, Section 15301, existing facilities, and adopt Planning Commission number 2021P11, recommending City Council approval of conditional use permits 1900015 and 1900016, and a waiver of locational requirements for proposed medical cannabis manufacturing and distribution facility at 2949 San Luis Rey Road. And I would like to commend the applicant on one of the best presentations I've ever seen since I've been on the Planning Commission. That's my motion. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you for that motion by Commissioner Goodkind. We have a motion or a second on that, Commissioner Busk. And I agree with your last comment, Commissioner Goodkind. That was a very good presentation by the applicant's representative. Well done. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, just a brief.
Yes,
comment.
Go ahead.
Just on the locational criteria thing, I think one of the other issues around the regulated uses was the city's desire to try to prevent the kind of overconcentration of kind of somewhat, we'll use the term regulated uses, but I mean, when you read the list, you know what you're talking about there. We all remember what downtown Oceanside used to be like, and that part of this was trying to prevent and reduce those kinds of situations where you had a conglomeration of bars and tattoo, parlors or facilities, as I think the city planner used. So I think the really emphasis here being the fact that this is not public customer serving prevents any kind of overconcentration or turning this into kind of a district or a blighted area of regulated uses. So just wanted to make sure that we're also clear about that's another part of the reason why the locational criteria waiver is allowed, should be allowed.
Great, thank you for that input. Again, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Seeing no other comments or requests for questions, we'll go ahead and vote. Commissioner Custer.
Yes.
Commissioner Busk.
Yes.
Commissioner Morrissey. Yes. Vice Chair Bama.
Yes.
Commissioner Goodkind.
Yes.
And Commissioner Crahill.
Yes.
And I also am a yes. City Planner.
For the record, we'll record that as 7 in favor, 0 against. The motion passes.
Thank you, and good luck, applicant. We will move to our last public hearing item. Item 8 has been struck from the agenda tonight, so item 7 is consideration of a development plan and conditional use permit to allow both interior and exterior modifications to the Chick-fil-A expansion located at 3475 Marin Road. The applicant is Chick-fil-A. Representative Todd Williams is the applicant name on the application. So disclosures, I'll start with myself. I've been to this location a number of times, and it's a challenge sometimes to get in and out, and I think that's probably one of the things that'll be addressed in the presentation. I read a couple of emails, I believe, that we received, and then staff report. Commissioner Custer?
Yes, I read the report, drove by the site, and I'm very familiar and been there many times.
Vice Chair Bama?
I have the same disclosures, staff report, been to the site several times, and another staff report for this.
Commissioner Morrissey?
Same disclosures?
Commissioner Busk?
The same.
Commissioner Goodkind?
Same.
And Commissioner Crahill?
Same.
Very good. We'll start with a presentation by Patricia Anders, our planning consultant. Go ahead, Ms. Anders.
Good evening. I will be presenting item number 7, as you mentioned, for the expansion of the existing Chick-fil-A restaurant at 3475 Marin Road. The project site is located at the southeast corner of Marin Road and College Boulevard and has a general plan, land use designation, and zoning of community commercial. The site is located within the Lake Neighborhood Planning Area. The applicant is requesting a development permit to allow an expansion, additional drive-through lanes, and interior and exterior modifications to the existing restaurant. And a CUP is required to allow an expansion to an existing fast food restaurant. The existing conditions, the site is developed with the existing Chick-fil-A restaurant, one drive-through lane currently and one pickup lane, as well as associated landscaping and parking. The development permit and CUP will allow interior renovations, including remodeling the kitchen and food service areas to improve food delivery efficiencies. Exterior improvements include approximately 353 square foot addition of kitchen, office, food storage areas, a second drive-through lane and canopy, a second bypass lane, canopy, new window and door for food pickup and deliveries, new paint and building finishes to upgrade to the new company branding and refurnished signs, as well as a 6-foot wrought iron fence and retaining wall along Marin Road. Site plan shows the existing building and the proposed building addition on the south and west elevations, and the additional drive-through and bypass lanes on the west and north elevation. The area shown in red is the proposed addition at the south elevation for the kitchen, office, and food storage areas, and the food pickup and delivery window and door is on the west elevation. These are the west and east colored elevations, which demonstrate the proposed new paint color, finishes, food pickup window, and delivery door. This is the landscape plan, and the project will remove approximately 825 square feet of landscaping to accommodate the second drive-through lane. However, 9 new trees will be planted to offset the loss, as well as other existing landscaping throughout the site, which will remain. But the project does exceed the 15% landscape requirement in this zone by providing 28% of landscaping. Based on communication with the adjacent California Coast Credit Union to address blocking of the egress of their ATM drive-through, staff is recommending adding condition number 4 under the CUP as presented here on the screen. The project is consistent with the general plan land use designation and complies with the Lake Neighborhood Planning Area and meets the development standards of the zoning ordinance. Staff recommends that the commission confirm a Class 1 categorical exemption pursuant to CEQA, Section 15301, E1 existing facilities, and approval of the development permit D2007 and conditional use permit, CUP 20-9, and adopt the updated Planning Commission Resolution number 2021 P08 with findings and conditions of approval attached herein. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Anders? I can't see the commissioners offline. I see a shaking of heads, no. So we'll turn to the applicant for a presentation. It lists Mr. Williams as the applicant, Mr. Williams or his representative. Do we have a presentation from him?
They were just going to be available for any questions.
Okay, great. Any questions for the applicant then, from anybody? I see a lot of shaking of the head, no. Okay, it is a public item, public hearing item, so I'll ask city planner, do we have anybody wishing to speak to this item?
Mr. Chairman, we have no public speakers requesting.
Okay, seems pretty straightforward. I made a comment in the beginning, Ms. Anders, about the challenge in that area for traffic, starting with when you first turn into the Walmart one driveway, because that's the only way you can get in from if you're coming from the exterior, and then as you make your way through by the bank, and the challenge I'm sure their customers have in entering and exiting the ATM lane that they have. And I know this is meant to address some of that with some signage and some striping in the pavement. Do you want to add anything to that? Because I know that's a challenge, and hopefully those modifications do work well.
Yeah, to your point, I actually walked it, and parking is, and I spoke with the owner, and the parking has been exacerbated by COVID because the indoor dining is shut down. So the parking typically, which would stop right around the credit union, now extends way further towards Walmart. And so they're hoping that when COVID is lifted, those restrictions will go back to normal. But the signage that they're proposing, we think will be helpful because it's, right now they have existing signage, but it's at the end of the ATM egress, the drive-through lane, so it's really kind of too late. So they're going to propose signage before that, so it's before the exit, so that the drive-through patrons are sooner alerted to the fact that there's an ATM. Because right now the existing signage is not really effective because it's after the fact. So the owner's thinking that with this new signage in a sooner for visibility for the patrons, that it'll help block them, just make folks more aware of it. So it is a problem. And I did speak with the credit union Commodore Gary Oster, who's I think listening in, and I wanted to confirm that their issues were resolved with this new condition. And he did share that they're good neighbors and they're happy with the new condition.
I'm glad to hear that because you're right, it is too late the way it's striped and signed now. And so I've seen several times that I've been in there that the ATM exit area is blocked by somebody going to Chick-fil-A. So I will say that during COVID, Chick-fil-A has been extremely efficient. They're very good at getting cars through with their orders and out in a very short time frame. They're very, very good at that. Their model should be copied wherever it can for somebody doing a similar type of business. So I will say they're good at that. Any further questions or comments?
I'd like to say that was a great product placement. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So I'd like to agree with staff and confirm issuance of Class 1 categorical exemption of existing facilities pursuant to Section 15301E1 of the California Environmental Quality Act, and 2, approve Development Plan D2007 and Conditional Use Permit CUP 2009 by adopting Planning Commission Resolution Number 2021-P12 with findings and conditions of approval attached herein.
Thank you. Motion made by Commissioner Morrissey. We have a second. I have a second over here. Commissioner Custard. Any further questions, conversations, deliberation? Seeing no heads or hands raised. Thank you for that motion. And second, we'll go to a vote. Maker of the motion, Commissioner Morrissey.
Yay.
Commissioner Custer.
Yes.
Commissioner Busk.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bama.
Yes.
Goodkind.
Yes.
And Commissioner Crayhill.
Aye.
And I am also a yes.
Mr. Chairman, we'll record that as 7 in favor, 0 against. The motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Anders. Again, item 8 on the agenda is being continued till April 5th, so that concludes our public hearing items.
Mr. Chairman, we're extending that to April 19th.
April 19th, okay, correction noted. We will then go to appeal of city planner's determination. I don't see anything listed on the agenda, nor for discussion items, so we'll go to city planner commissioner reports. I really don't have anything noteworthy to add this evening, but I'll turn to my right, and Vice Chair Bama, maybe you do?
I was just going to comment about our two speakers who spoke regarding the floodplain and how that came about. And as far as getting more information about how that does get changed, it was kind of interesting how that happened with the North River Farms project if any of you guys weren't there, I think, Curtis, you were the one that actually pointed that out the most. It was their consultant that they hired that was the only one that could actually change the floodplain, was allowed to change it. So it is kind of suspect. So I don't know how, as far as a comment goes to staff, they were asking for a little more transparency on how that came about and maybe some more information about where they can find more information on it. So I don't know if that's something that you guys want to pursue, but I thought that was a good comment from the two speakers in the beginning.
Yeah, City Planner, do you want to address that, or you want to bring back?
Chairman, the issue that was raised is really an engineering issue, and so you have, I guess you have three options. One is staff could talk to our engineering staff and ask them to contact these people. Number two, as a body, you could request staff come back to you with a report. And number three is you could simply acknowledge his comments and let it go.
Well, I think there's probably an interest in having those comments turn into some response back from city staff. So
Right.
if you wouldn't mind checking in with the engineering folks and bringing back either a report or a presentation, I'll leave it to you. That would be great.
Yeah, we can do that, no problem.
Thank you. Anything else, Louise?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Crayhill.
No report tonight.
No report. Commissioner Busk.
Yeah, I was just going to do exactly what Luis asked for. I think we need to have an engineering report on how that happened, and in fact, is it a true representation of what it should be? It didn't seem right at the time, and it still doesn't seem right.
Okay, good. And we'll look forward to that. Commissioner Goodkind.
No report, thank you.
Commissioner Morrissey has stepped out, so I'll go to Commissioner Custer.
No report.
And last but not least, City Planner.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your next agenda items on March 22nd, you have the South Morro Hills framework that we're going to ask for your comments. There's no formal action on this. We're just going to ask for you to review it and provide us your comments, and then we will forward your comments in some summary fashion to the City Council. The frameworks identifies some visions and strategies, key strategies, which will then be used to draft the community plan. The April 5th meeting has been canceled. At one point, we were discussing having an April 12th meeting because of because of some needs that weren't getting scheduled, but that has not been pursued. So if there's any confusion out in the community about an April 12th meeting, that is no longer on the schedule. So your next meeting is April 19th. We have a discussion on the circulation element amendments. This would be, I believe it's called the gap on the Melrose extension out towards South Morro Hills. Not the bridge, but the gap leading to the bridge. So this would be a circulation element amendment, and this body would make a recommendation to the City Council. Also, the Coastline Baptist Church appeal of the city planner's determination, we have scheduled that for April 19th. The CarMax car dealership out on the east side of town by Plaza, that is also scheduled for April 19th. And then we may bring the annual work plan for the Planning Commission, which identifies major projects, long-range and current planning as well. Your next meeting after that is, at this time, is June 7th, where we're going to ask for a recommendation of approval on the housing element update. This involves a site inventory of the sites that would demonstrate compliance with our RENA number of 5441. That will then go to the council. Council, March 10th is a Zenleaf CUP. That's the cultivation that this body recommended approval. March 24th, there's a cannabis report that the City Council has asked for, the Muni Code that this body just reviewed tonight, and then also establishment of an inspection fee by HDL, our consultant. Also on the 24th is a housing annual progress report. This is mandated by the state, where we indicate the number of housing units that were constructed in the last year, built by income category, the number of entitlements for housing, et cetera. It used to be a very brief form, and over the years, it keeps getting more deep in information that the state requires us to report to them. March 31st is the workshop, so this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon to fill the 2 vacant seats on the Planning Commission. Mr. Buss' seat is up for vacancy along with Mr. Crahill's. That doesn't mean that they could not be reappointed, but their seats are up for appointment. April 7th, the council will review the Left Coast CUP and also the Buddies CUP that was reviewed tonight. And then on April 28th, there's a workshop with the council that we're going to ask for a workshop with adoption. A lot of workshops are just to review the information, but we're going to ask for adoption. And that is for, pardon me, not adoption, but their comments, I'm sorry. Not adoption, but council comments on the South Morro Hills framework, similar to what this body will be doing on March 22nd. So that's the South Morro Hills framework on April 28th with council. And then June 23rd is a workshop with adoption, and that's for the housing element update. We'll ask them to adopt it. And then we have a standing item for August 4th on the housing element update in case there's a follow-up action needed. So that's your next agenda items along with the city council. I would like to note that on our general plan update, there's a public workshop via Zoom on March 13th at 10:30. This is a Saturday, March 13th at 10:30 on the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan. This is the specific plan that will focus as much growth as we can within our existing transportation corridors. And that was at one time scheduled for March 20th. We moved it up to March 13th. And then finally on March 15th, there's a meeting of the Buena Vista Lagoon Joint Powers Committee, and they are going to discuss the next steps regarding enhancement projects to revitalize or enhance the Buena Vista Lagoon. We haven't had a meeting with the JPC since June of 2017. Since then, the SANDAG approved the EIR, and so now the next steps is let's get some projects and start enhancing the BV Lagoon. That's all I had.
Oh, that's plenty. It's quite a list there. Thank you, City Planner. Mr. Morrissey, any input? Commissioner's report?
No report.
No report. I had just one comment real quick. So I feel like my cadence was a little bit off this evening, trying to manage this, the screen, and then the 2 commissioners that were remote, so I apologize for that. City Planner, I had one question, though. I've been approached twice in the past couple of weeks about Rancho del Oro and a project, or at least in their mind, a project to build an on-ramp onto RDO, which has been long contemplated off of Interstate 78. The circulation element that you refer to, this gap, is just the Melrose portion. I don't know if somebody read into that and determined, no, they're doing Rancho del Oro as well, but the people that asked me this, I said I was unaware of anything new on that issue.
I can ask the city traffic engineer to give an update on that in preparation of the meeting. I just said it, but I forgot the date where you're discussing the circulation element. April 19th, the circ element will come to this body. I'll ask the city engineer to address the RDO interchange if it'll be part of that or not.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Seeing nothing else, then I think we are adjourned.
Hey.